Alright, buckle up, because you won't believe what came out of Joey Diaz's mouth when the topic of Islam hit the table, and the way Joe Rogan reacted, pure gold. But behind the laughs, there's a deeper lesson here. A lesson about faith, respect, and power that you need to hear. Let's break it down. 4 shocking truths, one at a time. You know what's crazy? Sometimes the people you expect the least from end up dropping the heaviest truth bombs. Joe Diaz, the guy known for wild stories, foul language, and being the last person to ever hold back his thoughts, he's sitting across from Joe Rogan, and suddenly the topic of Islam comes up. And instead of jokes, instead of making light of it, Joey dropped something that made the whole room go quiet. Respect. Straight up, undeniable respect. Think about that for a second. This is Joey Diaz we're talking about. The man who's made a career out of making people laugh with the most outrageous, unfiltered rants. And in that moment, instead of throwing another wild story, he shifted gears. He spoke about Islam like he was standing in front of a crowd, pointing at something bigger than himself. And Joe Rogan, you could see it in his face. He leaned in. He wasn't expecting it. You don't lean in when you're bored. You lean in when you're curious. You lean in when you sense the truth about to land. And that's the power of respect. When it comes from someone unexpected, it hits harder. It's like watching the loudest guy in the room suddenly go quiet. Everybody pays attention. Respect is magnetic. Respect cuts through noise. Respect forces people to listen. Now, here's the beauty of it. Joey wasn't reciting verses. He wasn't preaching. He wasn't even trying to explain Islam. He was just acknowledging what he saw. The strength, the dignity, the commitment. And that's why it hit so deep. Because when truth comes from the lips of someone who has nothing to gain by saying it, it lands differently. It's real. It's raw. It's unpolished. And that's why Joe Rogan was shocked. Not because Joey was suddenly religious. Not because he quoted a scholar. But because Joey Diaz, of all people, recognized something undeniable in Islam. And when someone like him says it, you can't just brush it off. And here's where it gets interesting. How often do we overlook respect until it's pointed out to us? Think about your own life. You walk past people every single day who carry themselves with quiet strength. Maybe it's someone at work. Maybe it's that neighbor who never complains. Maybe it's the old man at the mosque who never misses a prayer, never raises his voice, but his very presence demands respect. And you don't even notice it until someone says, "Yo, look at that guy. Look at how he moves. Look at how he carries himself." Suddenly your eyes open. That's exactly what Joey did in that moment. He didn't just show respect. He forced everyone watching to see respect. He dragged it into the spotlight and said, "You might not pay attention to this, but you should." And that's a lesson in itself. Because here's the truth. Sometimes the strongest dalwar isn't words, it's presence. Sometimes the biggest proof of faith isn't an argument, it's the respect people can't deny when they see you live your values. And that's why Joe Rogan's reaction was so raw. He wasn't just surprised, he was impressed. He didn't interrupt. He didn't argue. He didn't roll his eyes. He leaned in, and you know what leaning in means. It means you're ready to learn. It means curiosity just lit a fire inside you. And that's the power of respect. It makes even the loudest skeptics go quiet for a second. Now let's get real. Respect in Islam isn't optional. It's woven into every single part of the faith. Respect for God, respect for yourself, respect for your parents, respect for your neighbors, even respect for your enemies. And when Joey Diaz recognized that he was unknowingly touching on one of the core strengths of Islam, a strength that holds communities together when everything else is falling apart. And let's not miss the hidden message here, because sometimes as Muslims, we forget how powerful our respect looks to the outside world. We forget how different it feels compared to the chaos out there. Joey didn't. He saw it, and he respected it. And when someone outside your circle notices something so deeply true about your circle, that's validation. That's proof that respect is a universal language. Now here's where it really hits home. Respect is contagious. You show it, and others reflect it back. You live it, and others can't help but notice. And when Joey Diaz, the guy nobody expected, spoke with respect, he gave Islam the spotlight in a way no lecture could. He showed that respect doesn't always come from scholars or leaders or people we put on a pedestal. Sometimes it comes from the most unlikely voice, and that's what makes it unforgettable. So here's my question to you. If Joey Diaz, with all his craziness, can stop and show respect for Islam, what's stopping us from showing respect in our own lives? What's stopping us from carrying ourselves in a way that commands it? What's stopping us from living so unapologetically true to our values that even people who don't believe what we believe have no choice but to admire it? That's the moment Joey created. That's why Joe Rogan leaned in. And that's why respect, when it's real, will always silence the noise. Because when truth comes from an unexpected voice, it's impossible to ignore. You know what Joey said right after that moment of respect. He leaned in with something even more powerful. He talked about discipline, and man, when he said it, you could feel the weight behind his words. He wasn't sugarcoating, he wasn't being polite. He said straight up, the discipline of Muslims is on another level. The prayer, the fasting, the consistency, the daily grind that doesn't stop no matter where you are, no matter how busy life gets. That's power most people don't even understand, let alone practice. Think about what he was pointing at. 5 times a day, every day, without excuse, Muslims stop whatever they're doing and pray. Not once a week, not twice a month, 5 times every single day, rain or shine, good mood or bad mood, work, school, travel, it doesn't matter. That kind of consistency. That's discipline most people dream about. You tell the average person to stick to a workout plan for 2 weeks, and they quit on day 3. You tell them to eat clean for a month, and they're back at the drive-through by the weekend. But Joey saw it. Muslims don't just talk about discipline, they live it. And here's the beauty of discipline. It's not about restriction. It's about freedom. See, most people think discipline is chains. They think it's a cage. They think it's rules that lock you down. But the truth, discipline is the exact opposite. Discipline is the key that unlocks freedom. You wake up early. You're free from laziness. You control your habits. You're free from addiction. You commit to prayer. You're free from the chaos of your mind. That's the paradox most people miss. Discipline doesn't limit you. It liberates you. And Joey, of all people, recognize that. Imagine how crazy that is. This is a guy who's been through the wildest ups and downs, who's lived on the edge, who's admitted to every kind of chaos in his life. And he's looking at Islam and saying, that discipline, that's real strength. That's like a bodybuilder admiring someone else's muscles. It means something. Now, Joe Rogan, he's a guy who respects discipline. You know it. Martial arts, fitness, daily routines. He talks about discipline all the time on his podcast. But you could see it in his reaction. Joey's words hit different, because Joey wasn't just saying discipline is good. He was pointing out that Islam embodies discipline in a way most of the world can't touch. And that's why Joe leaned in again. He was processing it. He was connecting the dots. Here's the deeper point. Discipline is what separates dreamers from doers. Anybody can dream. Anybody can say, one day I'll be successful. One day I'll get my life together. But discipline, that's the bridge that takes you from a one day to day one. Discipline is what makes the alarm clock your servant instead of your enemy. Discipline is what makes a man fast all day during Ramadan and still smile, still pray, still grind, while the rest of the world says, that's impossible. And that's exactly why Joey called it power, because discipline is a superpower in a world full of distractions. Let's be honest. The average person today can't even put their phone down for 5 minutes. Notifications own them. Screens control them. Distractions eat up their day. But a Muslim hears the adhan, and no matter what's on the screen, no matter what's trending, he stands up, washes up, and prays. That's discipline on a level the modern world can't compete with. That's why Joey was shocked. Because when you look around, you don't see that kind of consistency anymore. And when you do, you can't help but respect it. And you know what? Discipline doesn't just build habits. It builds identity. You don't just pray 5 times a day. You become the kind of person who doesn't skip prayer. You don't just fast Ramadan. You become the kind of person who can say no to temptation. Discipline doesn't just shape what you do. It shapes who you are. That's why it's so powerful. Because in a world where people are lost, discipline gives you a compass. It gives you direction. It makes you unshakable. Now imagine Joe Rogan hearing this. The guy who talks about self-control, about the grind, about the struggle of pushing yourself, sitting there listening to Joey Diaz, the wildest man in comedy, say that Muslims have mastered discipline. That's a moment. That's not just comedy talk. That's respect meeting truth, and it's hard to walk away from that without thinking. Here's the thing. Discipline is not glamorous. It's not flashy. It's not Instagram worthy. Discipline is boring. It's repetitive. It's the same action day after day, year after year. But that's what makes it so rare. Because most people quit the second it gets boring. Most people quit the second it feels repetitive. And that's why Joey admired it so much. Because Muslims don't quit. They don't negotiate with prayer. They don't cancel Ramadan because it's inconvenient. They don't put off their faith until it feels easy. That's real discipline. And when you stack years of that kind of consistency, you build unshakable strength. You build character. You build resilience. And that's something everyone, whether they're Muslim or not, can look at and say, yeah, that's something I need in my life. That's why Joey's words hit so hard. He wasn't just talking about Muslims. He was talking about the missing piece in most people's lives. Discipline. Because at the end of the day, talent can impress you. Luck can get you started. But only discipline keeps you standing when everything else falls apart, and that's why Joey called it power. Because in a world that's soft, in a world that's lazy, in a world that's addicted to shortcuts, discipline makes you unstoppable. Because the truth is, discipline doesn't lock you down, it sets you free. Then Joey went even deeper. He didn't just stop at discipline. He hit something that made the entire room shift. He said, Muslims fear nothing but God. That's it. No sugarcoating, no long explanation. Just a sentence that cut straight through the noise. And Joe Rogan, he froze for a second, because when you really think about those words, you realize how much weight they carry. Most people live in fear. Fear of losing money, fear of losing status, fear of failing, fear of rejection, fear of being laughed at. And those fears, they run people's lives. They dictate decisions. They keep people trapped. They make people settle for less, keep their mouths shut when they should speak up, live small when they're meant to live big. Fear controls them. And here's Joey Diaz, of all people, pointing out that Muslims walk with a completely different mindset. Fear nothing but God. That's a level of fearlessness that flips the whole game. Think about it. When you truly believe that only Allah controls your fate, that only He decides when you rise or fall, when you live or die, what's left to fear? People. They're just people. Bosses, critics, haters, bullies, they don't hold your destiny. Money, it comes and goes. Status, it fades. None of that has power over you if you've already surrendered to the one who controls everything. That's not weakness, that's the ultimate strength. And Joey, a man who's lived through chaos, who's stared down the roughest streets, who's faced demons most of us can't imagine, he saw that. He saw that fearlessness in Muslims and said, that's different. And Joe Rogan could feel it too. You could see him processing it. Because he talks about courage all the time. He talks about facing fear in the ring on the stage in life. But Joey was pointing at something deeper. A courage that isn't about confidence or training or mindset tricks. A courage that comes from faith. And let's be real. Fear is the biggest prison most people never escape. How many times have you stopped yourself from chasing a dream because you were afraid to fail? How many times have you kept quiet because you were afraid of what people would say? How many times have you stayed stuck in a job, in a relationship, in a lifestyle you hate because fear told you it was safer to stay put than to take the leap? That's not living. That's existing. And Joey was pointing out that Muslims flip that script. They walk with a freedom that comes from knowing that if God is with you, no one can be against you. It's like standing in the middle of a storm and smiling. Everyone else is panicking, running, hiding, but you're calm. Why? Because you know the storm isn't in charge. The one who created the storm is in charge. That's a completely different way of seeing the world. And when Joey said it out loud, it was like he was holding up a mirror, not just to Joe Rogan, but to everyone listening. Now, here's the kicker. Fearless faith doesn't mean reckless living. It doesn't mean you jump into fire without thinking. It means you move with confidence because you trust the one who guides you. It means you still prepare, you still plan, you still work hard. But you don't let fear paralyze you. You don't let doubt stop you. You don't let people's opinions chain you down. That's the difference. Fear makes you hesitate. Faith makes you unstoppable. And that's exactly why Joey's words landed so heavy, because he was showing the contrast. Look around at the world today. Anxiety is at an all-time high. Depression is everywhere. People are more connected digitally than ever, yet more isolated emotionally than ever. Why fear? Fear of missing out, fear of not being enough, fear of not being accepted, fear of losing what little they have. People are drowning in fear. And Joey pointed to Muslims and said, look, they've got something that cuts through all of that. They fear nothing but God. And Joe Rogan, the guy who's interviewed fighters, scientists, philosophers, the guy who's heard every motivational quote in the book, he sat there and listened. Because he knew Joey wasn't exaggerating. He was describing a reality, a mindset, a way of living that millions of people practice every single day. And deep down, everybody wants that. Who doesn't want to live without fear? Who doesn't want to wake up in the morning knowing nothing in this world has power over you? That's not just attractive, it's life-changing. And here's the part that really hits. Fearless faith isn't just about fighting external battles. It's about winning the internal ones. It's about silencing that little voice in your head that says, you can't do this, you'll mess it up. You're not good enough. Because when your heart says, I only answer to Allah, that voice has no power anymore. Suddenly you're free to act, free to try, free to live. And that's why Joey admired it so much. Because he knew most people never reach that level of freedom. They stay slaves to their fear. So let me put it like this. Fear is a chain. Faith is the key. Most people drag the chain their whole lives, never realizing they've been holding the key all along. But when Joey Diaz said Muslims fear nothing but God, he was pointing out that they actually use the key, they unlock themselves, they walk free, and in that freedom they find power. Because at the end of the day, the person who fears nothing but God is the person the world can't break. And then Joey landed on the point that tied it all together. He said people who live by faith, live with purpose. And that hit like a hammer, because let's be real, most people are drifting. They wake up, scroll on their phone, go to work they don't love, eat food they don't even taste, binge shows they don't even enjoy, and then crash into bed just to do it all over again. That's not living. That's autopilot. That's drifting without a compass. And Joey was saying, when you live by faith, it's different. You don't drift. You drive. You wake up with direction. You wake up with why. That's the thing about purpose. It's not about money. It's not about fame. It's not even about personal happiness. Purpose is about knowing why you exist. It's about knowing your creator didn't put you here by accident. And when you know that, life takes on a different flavor. Every prayer has meaning. Every sacrifice has weight. Every act of kindness becomes part of something bigger. You're not just filling time, you're fulfilling destiny. And Joey, the guy who's seen people at their best and their worst, knew this was the truth because he's watched people waste their lives. He's watched people chase addictions, chase fame, chase a high that never lasts. And then he looks at Muslims and sees this quiet but powerful sense of direction, a sense of purpose that doesn't need to be shouted, doesn't need to be proven, doesn't need validation. It just exists, it radiates, and when you see it, you can't ignore it. Joe Rogan knew it too. He's talked for years about finding meaning in life, about how people who have no purpose are the ones who suffer the most. Depression, anxiety, addiction, it all spikes when life feels meaningless. And Joey dropped it plain and simple. Faith gives you purpose. And Joe just sat there, soaking it in. Because no matter how many philosophers he interviews, no matter how many experts he talks to, the truth is simple. Without purpose, life feels empty. With purpose, even the hardest struggles feel worth it. Now, think about your own life. How many times have you felt lost? How many times have you asked yourself, what's the point of all this? That's one of the scariest feelings in the world, not knowing why you're here. But faith answers that question before it even forms. Faith says, you're here for a reason. You're here to worship. You're here to build.
Yeah.
You're here to live in a way that echoes beyond your own lifetime. And once you know that, you can't go back to drifting. You can't go back to living small. You can't go back to wasting days like they're disposable. Every day matters. Every choice matters. Every moment matters. And that's why Joey's words landed like they did. Because deep down, everyone wants purpose. Everyone wants to wake up and feel like their life means something. Everyone wants to know their struggles aren't random, their pain isn't pointless, their victories aren't empty. Purpose gives weight to everything. Without it, life is a boat with no anchor. With it, life is a ship with sails, cutting through storms with direction. And here's the kicker. Purpose doesn't just make life meaningful. It makes you unstoppable. Because when you have purpose, obstacles don't break you, they shape you. Failure doesn't end you, it teaches you. Hardship doesn't destroy you, it refines you. That's why people of faith can endure things others can't. Because they don't see pain as meaningless. They see it as part of the path. They see it as fuel. And that's something Joey Diaz, with all his rough edges and raw honesty, recognized in Muslims. He saw that they lived not just with rules, not just with rituals, but with purpose. And when you put all of Joey's points together, respect, discipline, fearlessness, purpose, it paints a picture of why Islam leaves such an impression, even on people who aren't Muslim. Because you can't fake those things. You can't fake respect. You can't fake discipline. You can't fake fearlessness. And you definitely can't fake purpose. People feel it when it's real. And Joey felt it. That's why he spoke up. And Joe Rogan, the guy who's seen and heard everything, sat there listening because he knew what was being said wasn't a gimmick. It was truth. And here's what I'll leave you with. Purpose is the difference between living and existing. Existing is about getting through the day. Living is about giving the day meaning. And when Joey Diaz, the last guy you'd expect, sat there and told the world that Muslims live with purpose, it wasn't just a compliment, it was a wake-up call. Because the person who lives with purpose and never drifts,